saying is while we would prefer young people to be here, we can be the messengers to help inform them. And sometimes we, as saints, aren't always informed and up to date on information that we need to know. And so while we may be discussing issues that doesn't directly impact our lives or we have any involvement in it, we can still take this away and help others. And so this is why we're here. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Sister Tora Johnson. She's our first presenter. She's a nurse practitioner, and she's going to be sharing this information with us. Can we bring the house up a little bit more? I still hear the monitor. Just a little bit. We ain't in church, guys. And that'll work. What's that? I didn't hear you.
Is that good?
Where are you at? 20? Negative 20?
Almost negative 10.
Bring it up. And yeah, and just give us right there, just a little bump, not much. All right, please come. And she's got a PowerPoint, and we're going to participate and listen. And let's engage. Let's ask questions as they come to mind, and we'll be very grateful. Let's give her a hand as she comes.
Thank you. Dynasty, I am going to have you. She's going to pass out a straw for those that were at the morning session, kind of understand what this is about. But I'd like everyone to get a straw and just hold on to that. Later in the presentation, I will explain what we are supposed to do with that, okay? First, I want to thank Pastor Paul and First Lady Priscilla for just allowing the youth to engage in things that affect them daily. As we did the morning session, we found out from our young people that all of them have either know people that vape, have friends that vape, or have even been offered to hit a vape. And in understanding that, I'm thankful for believers that believe in educating our children with truth, the truth about it, because I explained to them earlier, the marketers, all they care about is the marketing. They want you to buy the product, they want your money, and when we see and understand how this transition happens, I asked the young people, and I'll ask again, how many can remember there was, when you would go into a restaurant, there would be a smoking section and a non-smoking section. And what we have learned in time with the medical field is the danger of smoking. And what I need to emphasize on that is smoking, I even have uncles that have said they started smoking at 14 or 15 years old and had smoked like later in life. But with that, there has been time to research, to investigate, and time is what allows us to understand better the dangers of smoking. And once we understand better the effects, the causes of it, the lung cancer, the esophageal cancer, the throat cancer, when we understand that, then we kind of almost have to backpedal a little bit, which is why they took smoking out of restaurants in general, not just because of the smoker, but because of the secondhand smoke as well. And I said that to say, with vaping, it's newer. So with that, we very prevalent and evident, but the long-term effects will not come until years after. And what we're seeing is we're watching the trajectory of vaping and the causes and the developmental brain issues that we're seeing in young people. And when we're noticing that, it's at a much more rapid pace than what we've seen with cigarettes. So while they say, well, if you want to stop smoking, vape, we don't know the long-term effects of that yet. So I think that to just emphasize the importance of understanding this is still newer, and we already see a lot of implications on health, wellness, brain development, and the earlier you start, the longer a duration that you are exposed to the nicotine and the other aerosols that you take in. That just kind of gives a explanation as to the dangers of vaping.
Cigarettes are really bad for your health. We all know that. But what about vaping? I'm talking about those small, compact devices such as electronic cigarettes, e-cigarettes, that heat a liquid that produces a mist or aerosol, which is then inhaled. Is vaping?
Sorry, they had the wrong video. Okay,
E-cigarettes, vape pens, Juuls. They're often marketed as safe alternatives to smoking, but their cool designs, fun flavors, and the fact that they're easy to hide means it's not only smokers who want them, it's kids. And for kids, they're definitely not safe. Teens should absolutely not use Juuls, e-cigarettes, or any similar products. Here's why. When kids use Juuls or other e-cigarettes, they're getting a big dose of nicotine. This disrupts their brain development. It changes the connections between brain cells, causing problems with learning, mood, and impulse control. It makes depression and anxiety worse.
And as any smoker can tell you, nicotine is highly addictive. That makes it very difficult to quit e-cigarettes. And vaping makes it much more likely that kids will smoke real cigarettes later. It's true that a few e-cigarette brands don't contain nicotine, but most of them do. And all of them contain other dangerous chemicals like these. Formaldehyde, which is found in glue and embalming fluid. Diacetyl, which causes lung disease. Benzene, that's a carcinogen linked to leukemia. Some tests have also found metal particles in the e-cigarette vapor. The devices themselves can also be unsafe. They can explode.
The long-term effects of using e-cigarettes are unknown.
And because there are no standards, we don't know the ingredients in these products.
We don't want children to take unnecessary risks with their health.
And begin a lifelong addiction to nicotine. Talk to your kids about e-cigarettes and how to say no to these harmful products.
Okay, so I allowed the video to kind of at least give a quick example of what we're discussing here. So our first slide here just explains of what do you think you know about vaping. And it's important specifically for young people to ask this question and kind of start there on their knowledge. Because a lot of times their knowledge have come from who? Other peers. Oh, it's just flavored. It's just a hit of a nice little flavor. And when you understand that, a lot of times other young people make it think, it's not that big of a deal. Do you want to hit it? You know, and you get information, misinformation. And then what you see is in the marketing schemes, it's, you know, flavors like cherry, bubble gum, cotton candy, all of it which is being marketed towards young people to appeal to their senses. But what they have to understand is you're not just taking in that flavor of the cherry or strawberry, but you're taking in carcinogens, aerosols, and what they're doing is going directly into the lungs. So that's where we have to really educate and explain to our children the irreversible, which is important, the irreversible dangers of vaping. Next, we'll talk about what vaping really is. A lot of people use the term e-cigarettes, Juuls. They're different devices that what it does is you inhale the vapor that is made by the e-cigarette or vape pen. It heats up a liquid, which is usually like the cherry or strawberry or cotton candy flavor, and it usually contains nicotine. And for those of us who understand nicotine, as soon as you take a hit of nicotine, it's a highly addictive thing. And have you ever heard people say, I just need to hit my vape? Or I was telling the young people you'll see in class, they'll hold their head down or go to the locker, or bathrooms are a place where we see kids hitting their vape because that, and then the earlier you start with the nicotine addiction, the longer the duration, the more you compromise their mental health and development as well as their overall lung and heart health. So as the video explained, what is inside a vape? We know very common harmful chemicals, which include nicotine, which we discussed, which is highly addictive. Formaldehyde, which I asked the young people earlier, I said, if I told you to drink a thing of Elmer's glue or some embalming fluid, who would be the first to sign up for that? And a lot of them looked at me like, there is no way. But what you want to help them understand is, but when you're hitting a Juul, an e-cig, you're taking that into your body, into your lungs, causing irreversible damage. And what we're seeing is all of the chemicals that they're taking in. The difference between e-cigarettes and cigarettes are most cigarettes have a filter, which means they filter out some of the dangerous chemicals. Well, in vapes, there is no filter. So what that is saying, the carcinogens are directly hitting into their lungs, causing the irreversible damages that we see, which makes it much more dangerous. Next. So vaping by the numbers, this was from, I believe, 2002, and it says 1 in 7 high school students vape. Over 2 million U.S. middle schoolers use e-cigarettes, and most of them use the flavored products because that's what's appealing to the young people, and they think it's just a flavored product until you can't live without it, or when you go without it for long periods of times, you have headaches, anxiety, and different side effects. So vaping versus smoking, as I iterated, the difference is the cigarettes have the filter, whereas e-cigs have no filter. So as we discussed, the aerosols and everything are going directly to your lungs, which causes a rapider effect. You feel the difference sooner, but then you get the addictive behavior a lot faster as well. So then with that, we want to handle myth versus the truth, because we know that children and young teens will tell one another things that they heard or saw on TikTok or different things like that, but we have to line that up with what is the truth about what you're learning. And the myth is, it's just flavored water vapors. And the truth is, vape aerosols contain harmful chemicals, which is what we just discussed in the slide before. The myth is, it's not addictive. You know, I can do without it. I just hit it when I want to. But what you see is a pattern of that behavior of needing to hit the vape more and more. The importance of brain, specifically with nicotine. Nicotine affects brain development. So let's think about this. If our kids are 12 and 14 and they're hitting a vape at that age, that's a very pivotal age. We're hitting puberty, things are changing and growing. So if we're introducing nicotine at that young age, number one, you look at the duration of nicotine use when you start that young, and number two, your brain and body is still developing. So you're you're causing yourself to be at a detriment when you're starting at such a young age. And what it does is, a lot of people think that, I'm just gonna get it for like depression or anxiety. Well, studies have shown that it makes depression and anxiety worse. It amplifies the feelings of, rush and fight or flight. And when you have that, it affects the impulse control. So what they're seeing also is that they're concerned with vaping being a gateway drug. And what I mean by a gateway drug is, if you're exposed to this nicotine, what happens is you take the nicotine and for years, and if even in the vape pens, you can up the level of nicotine that you have. And once you max that out, people feel like they plateau. I don't get the same effects I got last year. So a lot of times what they're seeing is, once the vape isn't helping, they go to cigarettes. And then once the cigarettes isn't helping, then they go to weed and marijuana. And you can see that's why they're calling it a gateway drug, because you're exposing yourself at such a young age to, number one, nicotine, that eventually it'll plateau and you don't get the same effect, that same quick, instantaneous calm down or feeling that you get, and so you seek other things for that feeling. Important to understand your lungs and how it affects not just your brain function, but your lungs. And it says vaping can lead to chronic bronchitis, a disease called popcorn lung, which affects the bronchioles, as well as your respiratory system. We know in October, between October and April is flu season. And one of the things that I emphasized was when flu season comes around, those are respiratory diseases. So let's think of it in terms of if you're vaping and you vape, say, for a year and October comes around, if you catch the flu or pneumonia or COVID to an already compromised lung, you're going to be worse off than an average healthy person that contracts flu and COVID. And so when you understand that, in my couple years at the Howland Walk-In Clinic, I shared with them that when a 21-year-old can come in, and for each of my patients, I always listen to heart and lungs and do an assessment. And there was a 21-year-old young lady that came in, and I listened to her heart and lungs, and I looked at her, and I'm thinking, this does not sound like a 21-year-old's lungs. And so I looked at her, and my very first question to her was, do you vape? And she kind of looked at me very surprised, like, and she said, yes, she does. And I said, well, do you wonder how I know that? I don't know you. I've never seen you. And I said, when I listen to your lungs, I can hear wheezing and crackling, a lot of abnormal lung sounds. And with that, if you're already compromised, any sickness will be amplified because of the compromisation of your lungs. So in understanding that, I try and educate the young people on, I'm not just getting this second and third hand. This is something that I've seen. I've seen the effects of it. I currently work in general surgery, and it is my job to, when the emergency room pages for a consult for surgery, to go down. And just yesterday, I had I believe she was around 54-year-old woman that had a colostomy bag and had previous abdominal surgeries. And so what I am charged to do is go down, assess the patient, see if she's a good advocate for surgery, what we need to do, how we can help her. Well, she was a diabetic, and upon going down, I always read through the notes of her previous medical history. And so in there, I could see note after note after note of doctors that have already explained to her, we need you to stop smoking. And so as I was assessing the patient and having a conversation with her, and I said, have you worked on trying to, decrease the amount of smoking that you do or stop altogether? And her response to me was, I can't stop smoking. I can't do it. And then it is my responsibility to explain to her the importance of that. And it is to the point where surgeons refuse to perform surgery on her because, number one, you're a diabetic, so you're healing, you're not going to heal properly. And number two, your smoking is compromising your health. They're not going to take you under the knife and under anesthesia in an already compromised state. And so understanding how it's so addictive that a 54-year-old that needs a hernia surgery is looking at me saying, well, just discharge me from the emergency room because I can't stop. And so when you see this, and that's in cigarettes, so when you see this is automatically ramped up significantly with those young individuals that are vaping, okay? So some real teen stories or comments is, I didn't think I'd get addicted. I started for fun, and now I'm struggling to quit. Hearing from peers helps break the myth that everyone's doing it, because everyone is not doing it. There is a vast majority of those that are, but I explained to the young people earlier, the more we educate them, I said, when you talk to a teen, they're more apt to listen to you versus, oh, she's old, she doesn't understand, she doesn't get it. And the more we educate our children on the truth of the dangers of vaping, then they can help friends and peers and encourage them to at least try and quit. So why is it so hard to quit? I think we've covered that. Nicotine. The nicotine, and like I said, the vapes, they go higher in the nicotine, and once you tap out of that, then you're probably looking for another fix to calm you down or for whatever reason you've started. And this is information on how to quit if you've started. There's a 1-800-QUIT NOW. There are apps that are available that say quick start, and it teaches them how to kind of avoid triggers. I asked the young people earlier about coping mechanisms because that's when you see people kind of engage a little more in it when they don't have safe or responsible coping mechanisms, because then when you're having a rough day or someone's gotten on your nerves and someone says, well, just hit this, it'll make you feel better. You're more apt if you don't have inline coping mechanisms to deal with stress and the level of strain that we face. So I think they missed a slide of the popcorn lung, but what I want to show you is those that can stand, I want you to grab your red straw, and then I'll have you stand. Dynasty's going to time for 30 seconds. And so I'll let you know when to start the timer. For 30 seconds, all we're going to do is march in place. 30 seconds. Now listen, we did it for a minute earlier, and that was a little bit of a struggle. So I dialed it down just a little bit. So for 30 seconds, we're going to march in place. And what I'm going to simulate to you is what popcorn lung feels like. Because after the 30 seconds, what we're going to do is we're only going to breathe through the straw. We're not breathing through our nose. We're only breathing through the straw. Okay, we're ready for the 30-second march? Okay, let's go. Now, I don't want anybody doing high knees or anything like that. Just 30 seconds of getting our heart rate up, getting our heart pumping. Oh, so this is the example of a normal lung versus popcorn lung here. And what you can see is the inflammation as well as the narrowing of the airway. Yeah, it's a long 30 seconds. Okay, stop and breathe through the straw. See the narrowing? See how hard it is to get air in and air out after you've and we didn't exert ourselves too much. But the narrowing, this is why I gave all the young people earlier a straw. You can have your seats. To remind them of when you hit that vape and you compromise your lung and your brain damage, what you're seeing here is the inflammation that happens in the bronchioles. And breathing through the straw, I said, it's real when you struggle to breathe. Like, I remember Sean earlier, he's like, you know, you just want air. You just want air. And so I wanted to simulate that to them so that they see and understand and have a real life example of how you're compromising your health. When you struggle to breathe, everything we learn in medical school is ABCs: airway, breathing, circulation. Those are the top three. And if you can't provide airway, then everything else is a loss. Thank you, guys. Oh, I'm sorry. Questions? Yes. So there is, as we were discovering, and then I want you guys to put up the QR code as well. So I did get a QR code, so you can scan the QR code. It will take you to the Lung Association that will give education about vaping, the dangers of vaping, and the concerns that you may have, and provide some education for you there. And the second hand, they are seeing that, you know, the vaping mist that goes into the air, that they are seeing and studying that more, that it is causing secondhand effects on the people around that are inhaling that. And First Lady even asked, well, how do you know, or you know, how can you tell? And I said, well, a lot of times it's tricky because if you smell like a fruity smell, or you know, your cherry or strawberry or cotton candy. So then, you know, someone can easily, you know, be divisive and say, well, that's my perfume, or I just put gum in my mouth. And so you have to be careful and cautious of that. But they're seeing that it's affecting secondhandly. They're having, some of the young people are inhaling it back in, which means you're getting a double hit of the aerosol into your lungs. They found creative ways to kind of hit the same thing twice. I also iterated that for a pack of cigarettes, it takes 360 puffs for one full pack of cigarettes. Vapes can go up to 600 puffs per vape. So that's double. So, they'll say, well, my vape lasts longer than their pack of cigarettes. Well, it's because you have double that you're taking into your body. And then let's think about it. When you smoke, you have to take a cigarette break, you have to leave, walk outside, to vape, you can do it anywhere, inconspicuous. And what we're seeing is they have hoodies, backpacks. Some of them look like pins, some look like USBs. They're like hidden in plain sight. So it's just important that we're vigilant and educate our young people on not just the dangers of what you're putting yourself in, but the secondhand that we're still studying and researching. Anyone else have a question or comment? There's a small portion of it in decaf, but not to the extent of what you get in vape. Because, I'm sorry, what you have to understand with the vaping, it's not even regulated yet. So I was explaining to the young people earlier, so how much that is in each, because usually for the FDA, you have to have a certain percentage for them to even label it. So it can say nicotine-free and not be nicotine-free. It just doesn't have the 5 or 7% of nicotine. So there's a small, I think a smaller portion in the decaf, but what they're inhaling is going directly into their lungs in regards to the e-cigs or vaping. And I shared earlier, before I take my seat, I was transferred to the Liberty walk-in clinic one day, and I witnessed a young lady that was 18 or 19 years old, and she had come in and had kind of like left-sided weakness and kind of had a limp, and I was kind of looking at her, and she came in for another reason, but I looked at her and I said, are you taking, therapy, physical therapy and occupational therapy? And she said, yes. And I just asked, what happened? She said, I would take my Juul, and at that time, I didn't even know what a Juul was. She was like everywhere with me, everywhere. I would hit the Juul constantly. And what it did in an 18-year-old is caused a stroke that affected the right part of her brain. And she said, if I could tell young people anything, it would be don't touch it, stay away. If you haven't done it, don't do it. Don't even subject yourself to it. And if you have, find ways now at this level to quit, to cope. They have like nicotine. They'll give you the Nicorette gum and different things like that. But I've noticed too, for cigarettes, usually I would prescribe like a 7 milligram. If you vape, you need like 14 milligrams of the nicotine patch, which is double what you would need to quit smoking. But just looking at such a young lady, and I said I wish I had her name and number, because she said she would tell young people everywhere, it's not worth your life. She said she wanted to go to school to be a doctor and now has a debilitated left side due to vaping. So you're not invincible. It does have its effects. Some, it catches you earlier, some 30 in the nursing home. It can vary, but it's a dangerous game that the young people are playing, and I just want them to be educated about the dangers of it. Yes. Well, she kind of looked like, did you see the pen? Like, you know what I mean? She was kind of looking around to see if I noticed or could see. And she looked at me and she's like, no. And I explained to her, I just took that moment to educate her. Your lungs sound like what I would hear on a 70-year-old COPD with bronchitis. Like, not just a chronic disease, but with an acute disease on top of it. And I said, for 21, that's not what I expect to hear, the wheezing, the rhonchi, the crackles in your lungs at such a young age. And sometimes they're receptive in that moment. Now, what she did with that, after, I'm not sure. But she was receptive in listening and hearing what I had to say. I didn't get much out of her in regards to I'm going to try or I'll see about quitting. It was just kind of an interaction, and that was it. Right, and it's just very important to understand, like at 12, I mean, you're still going through puberty changes. It affects attention span. It makes your anxiety levels worse. I mean, there's just quick effects. And I had a young person that was actually in our Sunday school class that said when she tried to quit, she said, I had headaches, chest pain, I was having shortness of breath. She was literally going through withdrawal. And she said, sometimes, she said the first time she tried to quit, she ended up grabbing a vape again just to kind of like decrease the side effects. She said, but she did eventually get off of it. But I can't emphasize enough, and that's why I wanted all the young people to take this straw with them to forever remind them of what you're doing to your body at such a young age. And you may feel fine now, but flu season comes around. There are so many other respiratory diseases. COVID was really bad on those that smoked and vaped. Why? Because your lungs are already compromised. And then now you have a virus that has then affected your lungs, at which a lot of the patients we would see pass away. We looked in our ICU and we looked at the numbers. For those that smoked or vaped, it was a higher incidence of death because you're putting them on a BiPAP, you're giving them all the help that they can get, and they're still not able to regroup from COVID, flu, and let's just face it, they're tough already. on a healthy person. But what the young people are doing are truly compromising their lungs. When you have an incidence of pneumonia, you're more prone to getting pneumonia again, and understanding, I can't emphasize enough, not just the lungs, the heart, the brain development. There's so many things that are affected by e-cigs and vaping. I can't emphasize that enough. Yes. It has the same effect, but the marijuana pen is much worse because in that is THC, which is like the carcinogens that, like, you tripping out, as they would say, with that, hallucinations, things like that. And it's the same effect with, smoking marijuana versus vaping it in and it going directly to your lungs. And people go that route because it's that quicker effect and the duration of it as well. So that is much worse than just the, nicotine and things like that. And that's what you see them kind of revving up to, which is why it's a concern for being a gateway, because, well, now I can put THC in my vape pen and try that. And it's sad to see young people when they interact, they make it like it's no big deal, but it truly is. My daughter in college, and you see this more too with sports, and I asked a lot of them, I said, could you imagine running a 60-yard dash and then breathing out of a straw? I mean, you pass out because you can't get enough oxygen to your brain. And understanding the detriment of that. She had a girlfriend that ran track, and she said that she vaped, and she said when she quit, she's like, it was about 30 to 40 pins. But do you know that season she never ran? Because she always had an injury or couldn't breathe or something was you need air to play basketball, to run, to play baseball. You need air. You need to be able to have the capacity of your lungs inhaling and exhaling appropriately. And you're seeing this. My daughter said that her friend was sick the other day, and some of the symptoms, she said she's having, like, feeling some tightness in her chest. And, like, when you're in the medical field, you don't hear that from a 15-year-old. That's not a normal thing. She was having some chest pain and shortness of breath, and I told Trinity, I said, well, you tell her those are side effects of vaping. Does she vape? Because these are things I want to educate my children about. And she said she did ask her, and she says, no, she doesn't vape, and it went away. And I'm thinking, okay, you just don't know. They give them ways of it being so inconspicuous that the people you may least expect, you never know. So the more we educate, the more we even provide a safe place for our young people to talk to us about it. If you're struggling, we want them to come to us, but then we as parents have to be open to the discussion, not, my parenting was, don't make me slap you. You know better. You know what I mean? But before you go down that road, listen, what made you start? How was it introduced? Learn and understand where they came from, why they tried, who they saw doing it, the things of that nature. Because you can educate them better when you are receptive to hearing what they have to say and allowing them to explain that to you. And I tell all of my children, I would want you to come to me. But then my children are very frank in telling me, well, you have to make us feel welcome to come to you and talk to you. And sometimes as parents, we're like, if you vape, you're getting out of my house. And sometimes we have to find another way to kind of open that door and bridge the gap, because I would want my children to be educated by somebody that understands versus their peers that are going to say, well, just try. Your mom, she's old. She doesn't know what she's talking about. So keeping that door of communication open with our young people is very important, and making it a safe place for them to come when they need to talk and discuss or say, hey, Mom, I'm in a little bit of trouble. Yes, and I did mention not shaming. If they come and say, I raised you better than that, and I'm going to be honest. Sometimes our knee-jerk response is that, but saying, you know what, you have courage to come to me with something like that. Let's have a serious conversation about it. The kids are more receptive. If we're defensive and ready to knock them upside the head, that'll be the last time that they have a conversation with you about anything. And I've learned that even with my children. Sometimes, what did the word say? Bridle your tongue and kind of sit there. My eyes kind of, all the things. But we have to provide a safe place, because if you don't, it'll be the last time they open up to you about anything. And let's face it, they are struggling with so many things in the schools, in the high schools, colleges. I mean, you name it. Vaping is one of the things, but there's so many gender issues and confusion and things like that. But if we have to provide a safe place, because we want them to hear the truth. And if we want to present the truth, we have to provide a safe space for them to come with their concerns, with the, I messed up, or I tried it, or I did this. And sometimes we think we want to shame them out of it. That doesn't work. And we know with this generation, it's different. We have to provide a safe place. And how you respond will tell your child if they can trust you with what they're struggling with or going through. Easier said than done, I know, but anything else? All right, awesome. Thank you.
One quick question. I want, and this is not like I don't believe it, but is this an exaggerated example? And I wanted to ask that question because I didn't believe that it was, but our young people maybe believe, oh, you just, and I think this is a perfect tool to use if this is true. I was over there. I cheated. I breathed out my nose. I know they all did too. But this is true. So I wanted to ask that. So this, just the next time, just to walk up the steps and grab your straw. Thank you. Thank you. And also, this is Elder Satora Johnson from Agape. And I said, Sister Satora, nobody said anything to me. When I said to them, I wanted to properly address and recognize everyone. We're going to get some chairs here, and we're going to prepare for our next session. Part of this, what is it, 4 or 5?
school counselors, et cetera.
And I'm Jordan Ringo. I am a first year music teacher in Warren City Schools, and I work at McGuffey.
Check 1, 2. Hold the capes. I like the sound. So this is our panel, and if any questions come to mind, we ask you to just raise your hand. We're going to get in. And as you can see, we have a wealth of knowledge and experience on this. And I'm going to come down there this way. I'm out of the way. And so we had not long ago, and I think Councilwoman Hania could speak to this. I believe it was April 22nd, and the only reason why I remember it was my birthday, that they had a session in the council, and it was on the violence, the teen violence and vaping. I wasn't there. That was. Yes. Could you just kind of open us up there, and we'll move on through that preschool to prison, and really starting with that violence.
Okay. First of all, I just have to say that I had that meeting at caucus because my own grandson is in the street. He was in the 8th grade going to the 9th grade. He had stole my gun in November. And hardest thing I ever had to do was press charges on my own grandchild. And he went to JJC for 30 days. He got out. He went back in. And so I found out that we might have been too mean and not having a safe place, because, you know, once you raise a certain way, you do more fussing than you do more listening. And I just found out that my grandson, he's just in the streets. And it's hard for me as a councilwoman to, first of all, I got 12 grandkids. 10 of them are boys, and I got that one. I have that one. And I don't know how to reach him, so I decided to have a meeting on the violence and the gun violence. And I'm going to take you back just a little further than that. Before he stole my gun, his friend in the 8th grade stole the car. And when they pulled them over, my grandson went with him. He had a gun. Then after my grandson, his other friend stole his grandmother's gun and shot at somebody in Youngstown. And so I just was like, well, why are they so fascinated with guns? And so even if I go back a little further, another official, which I consider he's my brother, his son got shot in 11th grade. So, and most of these children come from decent homes. And so I just wanted to find an answer. Why are these kids so amused with guns? And I had an awesome meeting. I even met with Mr. Capers. I'm due to meet again to start a program, hopefully, to help some of these children with the gun violence. And so it's just a lot that I'm still searching. Why are our kids, even the girls are fascinated with the guns? And so I'm glad that Pastor Paul had this today, so we can all come together and try to find some solutions.
All right. I remember some years ago we had a similar like session, and at the time Elder Capers, I believe you were the high school principal at Warren Harding. I know we were out on Folsom, if you were. And one of the things that he shared, and I think this is where we'd like to start this discussion, it ties into what Councilwoman Ania Price is, in my opinion, with her grandson. And you said this to me, I've never forgotten it, but it was the cycle of a lack of education or a lack of income breeds poverty, and poverty breeds a lack of education, which ultimately seems to put you into the criminal justice system. Could we start there as this preschool to prison pipeline? Because what I do want to say, is that this discussion is not to shine any bias toward the school system. All right, that's not this version of preschool to prison pipeline. I just want to say that first. So could you start there?
Sure. Education, I think for me, personally, the reason why, I got into education is because I believed in the transformative power of a good education to be able to transform your life, open up doors, give you a greater opportunity. And that's a fact. In our society, you need education. You need a level of sort of know-how in order to be able to either get a good job, to continue your education after high school, to either do what you want to do from an entrepreneurial perspective. So education is very important. If you don't have those basic skills, you're going to not have the choices available to you that you otherwise would have if a strong education is in place. So I think in a very kind of basic or fundamental place, if we don't have access to a strong education, if families and students aren't taking advantage of educational opportunities that are there, if the schools are missing opportunities to meaningfully engage and educate students, they're going to kind of paint themselves in a corner when it comes to adulthood and be forced into some decisions because some options are going to be limited. They very well could lead to choices that could result in incarceration with that there.
Thank you. Wendy, I'll direct this question to you. You mentioned, I believe it was last year in our day session, the impact of the third grade reading assessment, that the dangers of failing versus passing. And I want to go back to Elder Capers here, but could you explain that impact? Because what we want to do, I want to kind of bring this around and then try to understand this preschool to prison pipeline. So we're jumping around a little bit, but I've got a method, I think, to this madness. Could you?
So here in Ohio, our students in the third grade, they have to take a reading assessment. It's the third grade reading guarantee, so it's the Ohio State test, and this test has changed so many times over the years. And so in order for a student to be proficient, they have to get a 700 on that test. Anything above a 700 could be advanced. Anything below means that you are basic, or whatever. So a lot of our students, they don't pass, and I'll just say a lot of our African-American students do not pass that test. And so next week we're having summer school, actually. I have to go back in next week because for the students, we have about 40 that did not pass. And so they have to retake the test again. If they do not pass that test again, since COVID, they kind of changed the rules a little bit, but the parents are now allowing to exempt their children, and they can still send them on to the fourth grade, where before they would have gotten held back. And so now they can take them and send them on to the fourth grade, but then they'll have a reading improvement plan that they'll be on in the fourth grade, and they'll still have to try, I believe, to pass it again. But what we know is that prisons are being built around this third grade reading guarantee. It's like for the students that we know are not passing it, then that's how they know how many prison cells should be built, because the kids usually drop out after a certain point.
When she shared that last year in one of our sessions, I was not aware of that, and even those statistics, I went and researched it. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't believe she was lying. I'm like, is this really real? And it just really impacted me at third grade. So if this is the third grade reading assessment, then it didn't start in third grade. This starts at the preschool. So
it starts at the preschool level. That's why I'm an advocate for preschool and kindergarten, and I really wish it was a law that when you turn 3 years old, you need to go to preschool, because the earlier that we can get it, it's that early foundation of reading skills and social skills and teaching our babies how to get along with one another, how to act in school, getting that early discipline in the structure, because when they're at home at 3 and 4 and 5 years old, it's a free-for-all. But when they're in school, there's structure. And so if we can get our babies into preschool, that would help, where when they come in at 5 years old to actual kindergarten, that's a whole new world, because kindergarten is really first grade. In a sense, those skills are getting harder and harder and harder. So the earlier we can get them in, the better. But there's a lack of education, and it is starting in preschool.
So is it fair to say, and I'm just asking this out of my ignorance, that preschool then is maybe the importance of it, the value is still maybe downplayed of what the structure should look like for a preschooler going into kindergarten? Because what I'm hearing is you just said that kindergarten is really first grade at this point. And so then if kindergarten is first grade, preschool had to have been kindergarten.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so what are our parents missing? Are they missing that?
This generation of parents, yes. It's like, I don't want to say they don't care, but they don't understand the importance of getting their children in early, not just having them to sit around and do nothing. Or if you're going to have them at home, then you need to have those skills or be able to provide education for your children at home, whether it's flashcards or teaching them their ABCs or how to write their names. Those are important skills that are being missed. So by the time they get to kindergarten, to me, they're already behind.
And if I can add on to that, I think getting them in school early and often. You got to be in school every day. You know, our highest rates of absenteeism is almost amongst kindergartners, and then it kind of spikes back up in high school. But even with the importance, the academic importance on kindergarten, we still have far too many families allowing their children to miss far too many days of school in order to be successful. And it's something that we really have to take the onus on ourselves, I think, as a community, you're right, to hold to that standard, because other communities are. You know, other communities are showing that their kids are getting that foundation, that they're coming to school kind of on task, on grade level, and when we don't, we're starting already behind the 8 ball. So instead of, you know, kind of being taught the things that you're to be taught, or even being taught beyond that to kind of stretch you and to try to grow your skills, we're kind of starting with remediation early. And if that remediation is a teacher taking extra time, teaching you to sort of sit still instead of write your name, that's putting you at a disadvantage, you know, several years down the line. And again, that may translate into gaps with reading. And that reading plan is now, we have kids who are on this reading plan still going into, I think, the 6th or 7th grade right now, 6th grade. So that reading plan doesn't go away. So now they have to get extra intervention time for reading, going into middle school, and may follow them to high school. And what that's going to mean, instead of them taking classes where they could be exploring opportunities for their future, where they could get trained in the trade, where they could be taking college-level courses or things that are of their interest, they're going to be sitting in extra time and reading intervention, still trying to make up for missed opportunities earlier on. So
my question to that response there is getting them in. I've seen, I've heard, and I've read, parents' perspective is that my child needs a mental wellness day. I don't know if you've seen that on Instagram. I've talked to parents, just in general, and that was their reason why they didn't send their child to school. They needed a mental wellness day.
It's all kind of excuses that we get. Somebody's dog died. There was a death in the family. I couldn't get up. I couldn't wake myself up. Now, some parents do work. They, you know, when you got single parents that are working, I get that. And we're told we can't parent the parents. But it's your responsibility. You had that child. It is your responsibility because they are looking at you. You are teaching them, you know, for the future. So however you act or however, they're learning all of that from you. It's a learned behavior. So it's our parents. The kids can't drive themselves to school. There are buses that are provided, but if you don't get yourself up, we even had to buy alarm clocks for parents. We have alarm clocks for parents. We have parent like mediation, AIP meetings, attendance intervention meetings to say your child has missed so many days. This is the House bill that, it came up, a letter has been drawn up. And so we've had to take parents to meetings down to the courthouse because of attendance. It's not the children's fault, but as adults, we have to be an example to show the kids and be that advocate to get them to school. So yeah, we hear all kind of excuses.
And I'll take this to my Jordan. Her first few days of school, well, I'd say, I don't know, weeks, or I noticed that she had a whistle, and I kind of laughed. I was like, "You're not a gym teacher," and I was like, "Why do you have a whistle?" And so I would just, if you would just share your first year experience, and what can you confirm or that you have seen based off what we just said at your first year of teaching with the grades that you are responsible for?
I mean, for my first year, so pretty much I have had from kindergarten up to 8th grade. So, of course, each grade level is different. And, just for me overall, being a first year teacher, it's just been a learning experience. So when people always ask me, like, oh, how was your first year? Of course, like, I'm a first year. I'm still learning. I just student taught, for a semester. And, and that was very different because, of course, in the student teaching process, I have somebody to look up to, as they call it, the cooperating teacher. So if I have any questions, concerns, I have somebody, kind of to fall back on. So, being in the job, of course, it's a different experience. As far as me having a whistle, that was, because of the behavior. And, my voice does not carry, when you have students screaming, and the room is very loud. So, that was kind of the purpose that I had for the whistle. But, even in my experience, I know in our, younger grade levels, of course, like we had students, that miss. And, for me, being that from like K through 5 is like our general music classes. So in my case, at my school, some, like first, second, third, all of the specials, kindergarten, first grade, second, third grade, third, fourth, fifth, I only seen, each group level once a week, so kindergarten I had a designated day, but regardless, I only seen, each class, each group that I had once a week. So you can imagine, when students, miss, and it just so happens to be that, they had like music on a Friday, it affected, the students. And of course, like we talked about with the absentees, I know I was talking to some of our liaisons and we were talking about a specific student, because I know even some of the specials we would talk about, like, have you seen this student, or do you know who this student is? And it was like some students, I'm like, I don't even know who this student is, just because they have never been at school. And as far as, like I said, of course, I only see them once a week, but that still affects them, when it comes to like the music. And I know some of our liaisons, they had went to that house to go like check on the student, and it seems like the parent really couldn't do anything. Like the student was at home playing a PlayStation, had food, lots of food, and and the student, it seemed like the parent couldn't do anything with that child, which is unfortunate in that case, because you would think as the parent it is your responsibility to get your child up to school. So it definitely affects, like I said, especially in my case, when I only see certain groups of students once a week, that affects their grade, affects their learning, overall in general.
I want to piggyback off of what Jordan just said. I had a parent that called me earlier this year because her child was acting up, and the parent was at home crying because the child would not come to school. So they called the principal asking me if I could get on the phone and talk to their child to convince them to come to school.
Elder Capers, what did you want to say on that? I seen it. What you want to say about that?
Something that comes up. I think that the question kind of begs the question. Well, what are the schools doing? And how are we responding to this? As principal said, there are interventions. We have liaisons. We have support people who kind of work with families to try to fill in those gaps. Whether that's providing gas cards, if that's helping kids. We have kids who come to school every morning and they shower and they bathe at school because they don't have water at home. We're washing clothes, putting, the clothes they wear to school away and giving them clothes to wear there. In our district, we spend nearly $500,000 to have 25 mental health professionals in our buildings, nearly 5 per building, to help with anxiety, to help with stress, to help with intervention. We talk about vaping and the causes of that. We partner with an agency, and we have a great brother in one of our schools who kind of works with vaping intervention with our students. Our guidance counselors, nursing services, students can kind of get full-scale well visits at school. From nurse, so there's a plethora of services that we provide with this. But one thing that I don't want to be lost, especially in the house of God, when we talk about the struggles that our parents have and that's going on in many of our families, we're not family bashing, we're not parent shaming and all that, but I think the message is, man, our folks are struggling in these communities. Like, there's a level of bondage and being bound that's going on, and it's impacting our kids in a very significant way that's impacting generations. And I think as we look at this as the church, as the people of God, there's just some things that, the Lord has given us authority over, right? And that's just kind of the mission there. So that lack of hope, that lack of expectation, that feeling like I don't know how to get going or how to do or how to speak life into my child or how to gain the advantage over what I'm going through, we have the answer for that. And at the crux of it, that's what's going on. So yes, poor educational outcomes may lead to prison. Yes, there's some things that our students go through in school that may adversely impact them, outside of school and different things like that. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. The devil it does not have to be that way. And we have the answer for that, and we really just need to seek God, continue to impact our families, impact our communities, to really strive to overcome these things. And I guess when I laid in talking about the supports, there's a tremendous investment in that. There's a lot of resources in place, as I know there is in Canton as well. But there's some things that are just, no matter how much money you throw at it, how many people you put at it, the root of some of these issues, are spiritual, and that's our mission field. I think that's our opportunity, because yes, the stats are what they are, but they don't have to be that way,
You got ahead of me on the creepers. I wanted to go there. Go ahead, and we got a question here.
I just wanted to say I also work in a school. I work at Summon Academy, 8th through 12th grade, and this is my first year going back to education. I worked as a preschool teacher for TCAP Head Start for 10 years. Then I went to Warren City Schools for about 10 years. Then I did nonprofit for another 10 years. And this year I decided to go back to education. And the school I work at is predominantly white children. And it was a wake-up call for me this year, because I was in the school system when you used to fuss at the kids and they listen. So I consider where I work at between Belmont Pines and JJC. There's only 80 kids that go there, but they all are on an IEP. And if we're talking spiritual, half of the kids that I deal with don't believe in God. They worship the devil. Half of the time, while they come up to me and show me drawings, I'll be like, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And I deal with a lot because they are white kids. I feel like they make a lot of excuses for them in the school that I go to. Half of them don't even be in class because we do have mental health that's there almost every day. Half of them be in the mental health. And the counselors all the time, not learning. We have kids in the 12th grade that can't read, that can't write, and the ones who can write like first graders. And it's just amazing to me how some of our children, white or black, because they are all our children, but it's just amazing to me how far back we have went.
Wait, let me give you the mic. I know you don't need it, but I'm going to give it to you anyway.
I love you. I got a statement, and I don't know about the educational system in Ohio. I live in PA. I used to work for George Junior Republic, my wife and I, with kids from 8 years old to 18 years old, and in extreme cases, 21. Now, our interventions were in-house because the kids were wards of the state. They were put in our care because of various social ills. Parents got shot due to drugs and all those kinds of things. I want to say, I think, to the councilwoman,
Yes.
you did right to do what you did with your son, your grandson. Did the same thing with my grandson. He's 30 years old now. He didn't have to go back to jail no more. First, I body slammed him, and then I sent him to jail because he went to Walmart. He didn't have a bicycle. The police brought him to the house, and I told him he couldn't come in my house after 10 o'clock. He did. That's when I body slammed him. But the next time he comes to the house with the police, they said, well, his bike is in the trunk. I said, he don't have a bike. He was visiting from Florida, us in North Carolina. And I said, well, he stole a pellet gun. Well, take him with you and the bike with you. Too many parents find themselves in I'm afraid of what the city is going to do, what the county is going to do. In North Carolina, they had pre-K and K, then first grade. And those assessments, as you talk about the third grade reading assessment, then they had one, I think, in fifth grade. And we did all of that at George Junior because the school was on the campus of George Junior. And we had social workers and whatnot that dealt with them, just as the Elder Caper said, you have in the Warren school system. On the prayer and on the spiritual thing that Elder Capers just mentioned, when I worked as a TA in Durham Public Schools, we took our oil with us every day. The scripture tells us about what we're supposed to do to the doorpost, the lintel, and all of these kinds of things. Before we went, my charges were BEH, that's behavioral and emotionally handicapped children. We anointed the desk in the room prior to school. We anointed those doorposts. And we got down and had a little prayer group in our school that we prayed before. The principal was included. So prayer can go where email, where text, and all these places can go. And pray for the families that send children to your school. Volunteers. And I'm through.
You feel that?
Parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles need to volunteer to assist the school system.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Any questions for this panel? Yes, sir. All right, your question was? All right, now I want to get to that. I really want to put that on the end of our discussion, what the church can do, because we wanted to hear where we are. So I would like to get to that question just toward the end, what we can do, because it's in here, the impact. When Councilwoman Hania Price had her call this meeting, she asked for pastors and organizations. It was an inclusion of everyone. And so it included the church. And I preached not long ago that at the district meeting, what was my subject? You still need it. I think it was something like that. And so the church is still needed. Could you talk about the discipline and the suspension, the non-suspension, whatever that looks like? I know Wendy and I have had these conversations after church, but could you just explain what you're up against in that form of discipline and what that looks like?
So I believe it was back in 2014 under the Obama administration, suspension in grades pre-K through third was taken out of our hands, which I don't always believe was in suspension, but sometimes you have to send a very strong message to the parents, even when they're young, to say, we're not playing with you. It has to start when they're young. And because that has been taken out of our hands, we are not allowed to suspend students' grades pre-K through third. It starts in fourth grade. Now in Canton City, we have alternative schools where if we do decide to suspend, it's not an out-of-school suspension. They go to a suspension school where they can still get their schoolwork. They're in with like K through 8. So it's a multi-age classroom that they're in. We can suspend them for 5 days, 10 days, just depends on the severity of what they've done. But I feel the strong message should be to the parent, like, yeah, your child has done something so terrible. We need to send this message of, it needs to really be an inconvenience to the parent to say, get your kid under control so that they can come to school, not disturb others, and actually get their education. So that's been our struggle. And I'm talking kids who are throwing chairs, throwing dust, destroying rooms. We got to evacuate the room because they're in there having a full-out, I don't want to say full-out Baptist fit, but they're in there having a full-out tantrum. I mean, it's just a mess. They're hitting us, kicking us, cussing us out. Like, you would not believe the things that we go through and what we're up against, and we cannot suspend them.
Would you please help them understand what you're up against? I mean, just a couple, because I remember you and again, you said this is from what, kindergarten of third?
I have K through 3.
K through 3, and you can't suspend them.
Cannot suspend them.
Do you remember the Sunday we were talking and you told me, I think it was a first grader that told the teacher she could suck his?
Oh, yeah, all of that.
First grade.
That, yeah. It's the language, what is being told, all of that to us. And as much as I want to, Jesus, it takes the strength of God to really hold, because I'm old school to my heart. I wasn't raised that way. And they come to my office, I shut that door, and I'm like, who do you think you talking to? It's one of those. And they respect you. The kids, they want structure. They want that love. It's that tough love that they want. They know Miss Hubbard, she gonna get on me, but Miss Hubbard loves me. At the same time, she's gonna hug me. We're gonna hug it out after she's done fussing at me. But that's what's missing.
Elder Capers, can you say something? I want to hear from Councilwoman.
Yeah, and amen to
yeah, and amen.
to what she said. And I think on the other end of things, a little further down, through some of the interventions we were doing, we were seeing a reduction in some of the behaviors and some of the suspensions and removals from school. But this year we've seen an increase, and our spike was directly connected to vaping, and not just vaping, but vaping with THC. So the possession of these things, kind of doing these things in bathrooms, having THC, so now you have a controlled substance, and that type of thing. So and I think the end of that is a lack of accountability. The fact that you can't do this in school, you can't have this in school. So at some point, that accountability is missing, and sort of the response to authority. And it's not everybody, it's not all kids, right. But in some cases, that's kind of what we're seeing is as things progress, just that accountability, isn't there. I'm going to do what I want to do, because I want to do it. And if you say something to me, then I'm going to get big and bad and sort of come at you some type of way and let you know how I feel about it. Because in many cases, that's eroding. So, yeah, and that's something that drives some of those responses. And again, to the point where even if we're intention to do some type of alternative discipline, to work with the student, to do an intervention, the response might be so extreme in some cases with language, with the response, it kind of just takes it to a degree. Something small ends up becoming something big because of that lack of accountability there.
Councilwoman, would you?
At the school that I work at, because everyone has an IEP, they never get suspended. You probably have to almost murder somebody to get suspended at the school that I work at. I remember a ninth grader brought a sword, not a knife, but a sword to school. And I think he only got 7 days at the most. I just knew they was gonna expel him, but no, because he has an IEP, you can't suspend kids with IEPs like you could a normal child. And vaping at the school that I attend, they vape so much that you don't even tell them to stop. You just take it from them. You don't even suspend them at the school I work at. If you at the school that I work at, that means that you probably got kicked out of all the surrounding schools. So we're not dealing with just Warren City. We're dealing with Bristol, Kinsman, Cortland. We dealing with the surrounding schools of kids that probably had got suspended in. And
The Trumbull County then?
Trumbull County.
Okay.
Or if you just have anxiety and you can't function in regular schools, you go to Summit Academy.
All right. Jordan, can you contribute to?
It ain't my field, but I know. I mean, we have, there's, like I said, even just like the students overall. I mean, like, even hearing stories from like some of my colleagues, just about like the craziest things that students, tell their teachers and stuff like that. And I know it seems like little discipline has taken place. I know they haven't gotten suspended. I mean, maybe the most they may get is a in-school suspension. But like I said, I know there's been a lot of different, things. I know, like I said, I've heard, just through stories of teachers about, students saying this, they've done. I know some things, I know from like our littles, like, some students have had like a, emergency removal. But, like I said, they're little, so they're not going to get suspended, of course. But like I said, I mean, I think the closest, depending on the situation, but, we have like in-school suspension. So I know even some of the craziest things, that's probably the most they've gotten. It was just like a, in-school suspension, few days,
So it sounds, I don't know, even within the suspensions and in-school suspensions and things of that nature, it's just another day for them, I mean, it really isn't impacting them as we would want to see. Yes, Elder Nick.
We were at Eastern Correctional Institution. That's a state of Maryland largest state prison. We baptized 65 inmates. The superintendent, the chaplain at that prison is a superintendent at Maryland Eastern Shore, and he also is the chaplain. Before he became the chaplain at the prison, he worked with he was juvenile advocate officer. He was sharing with us while we were there how he quit the job as a juvenile advocate counselor because he spent so much time in court. Every weekend, when Monday came, he was in court trying to advocate for one of his juveniles that he was responsible for. Some of the juveniles that he was responsible for when he was a juvenile advocate, he's seeing them now as prisoners in the prison system. There's some of these same teens and that he would advocate for and try to keep them out of jail. And he was a man of God, so he tried to exercise love and try to see what was going on behind the scenes. And each individual had a different story. And the root of it many times was at home. They had problems at the, in their home. This one gentleman he told us about was the oldest. He was 13. He had 8 siblings. He was the oldest of the 8. His mother was a junkie. She called the police on him because he busted windows in the house. He busted windows in the house because she was in the house with a John. He did not take him to court. He showed love, and in doing so, he kept him out of prison. Long story short, that young man turned his life around from the course he was going because of this man of God in his position as a juvenile advocate. And didn't take the legal course with him. He showed him love, intervened, became a part of that young man's life. And in doing so, that young man turned his life around. He's married, has a family. Even his mother turned her life around. But it is real that prison is the home if these interventions don't happen. The inmates that we baptize, when you're in that prison system, there's so many young black men. I mean, they're your nephews. I mean, they're your little brothers. Their prison is full of young black men, and it's real. If nothing happens, that's where they end up at. And that's what, he quit his job as a juvenile advocate. He's the chaplain now, and in that position, he is using that to help, disciple some of these young men. And it took them to be in that setting for him to be able to disciple them. But if intervention is not made, they end up in prison, because I've seen them there as we do our prison ministry.
So we're going to wrap this up, bring this. Let's get back. One question that Elder White, Superintendent White asked was, what, you have one. Thank you, a young person. Come on.
I used to work at Inspiring Minds, and I just graduated high school at the time, and I was working with the 7th and 8th grade kids, and I had a boy that was 12 years old that got shot by his own cousin, and it's because they found his dad's gun and thought it was empty, and he shot it. And then when he woke up, he asked for that same cousin because he wanted him and missed him. And then during the program, we had to watch him because we didn't know what he could do or couldn't do. And then one day I saw that he was having a rough mental day. And I took him to the class. I was like, what's wrong? He's like, it's like I love him, but at the same time, I want to shoot him back. And my question is, what would you do in that situation? As an 18-year-old kid that just graduated high school, what would you do in that situation?
So we've got these angry young people. I think we were in that part of that council meeting. It was, why are these young people so angry? And they were resorting to violence, gun violence particularly. And that was the question, what would you do in that instance? Anybody?
I think just what you did, connect with them. A lot of the things that we've kind of talked about, it stems from a lack of connection. I believe, as far as connection to schools, connection to folks, so that connection is important. Having that relationship and really trying to get him the help that he needs. When we're dealing with things and carrying the weight of others, we can't solve all the problems, but what we can do is be consistent. We can demonstrate that love, right? We can have that support, and we can be aware of the resources that are around and get folks to the resources that they need, in the time that they, that they need them there. So having a space where he was free at Inspiring Minds with you to sort of process his emotions and just sort of be and show up as he was, it shows that was a safe space. And that's really important for our kids, as was said earlier, because if they don't have that safe space, they can't share what they're going through. If they can't share what's going on the inside, can't come out, it can't be healthily addressed.
So, and I think this will take us right into what can the church do. How can we be a safe place as the church for these youth? Not so much a Bible thumper, but just what can we do to be that safe place? Our churches, there are pastors in this room that are located on various sides of the city here in Warren. What can we do?
I would like to see more pastors in the schools. I do know at our school, Canton City has opened it up to where there are Bible groups that come in after school and have programs for the kids. So one is called the Good News Club, and the other one is called Impact. And so they come, the parents sign up, and they are sharing the good news about Jesus Christ. And they have a lot of kids that stay after school for that. So if churches would maybe get involved, because it's allowed now, you can come in and have, you take kids out of school during the day and, have Bible classes with them or whatnot. But these particular groups chose to do it after school. If the churches would kind of look into that and invest in that, I think that would be a great thing.
Anyone? That's good.
In my kid voice, because I hear the kids say they outside all the time. We outside. I think the church got to go outside. I think too many times we want people to come to us. We have to go where they are. I'm having a Mother's Prayer June the 28th. By the way, it's Gun Violence Awareness Month. So this will be our 8th annual Mother's Prayer. We're in a Hampshire house this year, and we found out that if we go where the people are,
right,
that we can reach the people more. And I just think that our young males need guidance. They don't have an outlet. Women, we get together, we talk about our problems, but a lot of males, especially our black males, don't have an outlet, don't have anyone to talk to. It's 12 churches in Warren, on the west side of Warren. Those are buildings. And if we don't go outside, let's go outside and get them and maybe bring them back to church. Like you said, a lot of people have never been to church. I did have I Am King last year at Grace AME, and we got 20 boys. If anybody want to get together with me afterwards, I've been talking to Pastor Walker, I would like to do 100 boys in one area. And I have a women's females group, so I can't teach boys what you guys can teach them. But I'm willing to organize something and bring 100 boys, bring the Tay-Tays and the Leroys, because sometimes those are the ones who are missed, the ones that we forget about. So anybody that's willing to help me organize 100 boys in one place and do a workshop, I am willing to offer my service. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, we talked about a lot of the negative, but it really is a small percent of the students who probably present a pretty significant percent of what we talked about today. The flip side of that is that there's whole lot going on. There's a lot of positive happening. There are a lot of kids who are doing the right thing and whose lives are being transformed because of education and going in the opposite way. So with that, how that translates and what the church can do, I think it's just really important with kind of pouring into just sort of the how-tos and how to cultivate those things that will help students to be successful in school. So, talking about the importance of attendance, the importance of, kind of behavior, and even teaching some of those things if necessary. You said if parents had to be given alarm clocks, it may need to be that fundamental of a level to really kind of teach and to pour into just some foundational things of helping families to be successful, of helping students to be successful. I think the biggest challenge for our young people today is that they're flooded with so much information and so much misinformation. They have access to everything. Vape is taken off because it's promoted in their faces, it's in their faces. Marijuana is legal now, so that's why THC is creeping in, because it's decriminalized, it's accepted. Gambling. I can't watch ESPN without being tempted to gamble. I couldn't imagine as much ESPN as I watched when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. I would have found a way to place bets and to do this, because I would have just known that I would have been able to win these bets based off what's going on. So our kids have a lot of negative influences. I think we have to be as intentional with having as many positive influences coming their way, because they're flooded with so much negativity. We have to reverse that, and we have to overwhelm everything that they have access to in their pockets. And I don't even want to go into details about what they have access to in their pockets, but especially if we just think for about 10 seconds what these kids have access to in their pockets as young as 12 years old, whenever you get their hands on a cell phone, it's really unbelievable to think about where their minds are, what they could be tempted to be dealing with, and just all that they're wrestling with just going through a day that we never had to deal with. So what we can do, I think, is counteract the negative influence with as much positive influence. I love the idea about getting outside and meeting them where they're at, because they definitely need that positive influence. It's necessary.
All right, one thing, and we're going to close here. Sister Wendy, you mentioned, and I think that was Governor DeWine. Did he just sign that bill this year, or was that last year, where you could take the students out for religious? That was this year? Could you, I remember reading it, but, because how many, are any of you aware that you could take a student out for a religious meeting and out of school, and it's acceptable? Any of you all? Show of hands. That was done this year. So could you?
We're still kind of learning a lot about it.
Okay.
And so again, we had two groups that came in, and I was approached by another group that wanted me to sign a petition. I'm thinking, woo, and I kind of had to stay out of it. Like I'm all for it, but because of my position, but I'm like, yes, do it. I just couldn't sign my name on it. But there are several groups that are around that are trying to come to the schools and either pull them out or come in and do Bible classes. But yes, you can, a church can come in. You have to bus them yourselves, like transport them somehow yourself, but you can take them out of school during the day for a portion of the time and have Bible classes with them, or like I said, come in after school is over and do it. So it's available.
Go ahead.
And it would have to be non-core academic time. So during a lunch or during an elective, if families agree to do that. So like I know there's a neighboring outlying district, a significant church, they have some members there, got a group of kids together who agreed to do this, and there was time within the schedule that they were able to bus them to their church, I think for a period or lunch or something like that, have a Bible study, have a fellowship once a week or whatever, and then bus them back to school.
And I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to make sure this wasn't taken away from educational time and learning. But it is during an elective or lunch that something that like this could be structured. So the reason why I brought it up, I just wanted to show how the church can be involved, and the door is not totally closed to churches or religious organizations. Come in, go ahead.
And I know one of our schools, Willard, Pastor Odom, who's a pastor here in Warren, he's there every day. He's been there every day for about 5 years. In the morning he's there, at lunch he's there, consistently just kind of been that presence. So something as small as that, if there's time that can be dedicated, as long as it's consistent, there are opportunities just to show up and to be present. He has a lunch bunch with kids, a few kids that he connects with every day, and he speaks about it really passionately, just about consistently, being in the school. So those opportunities are there, and in various spots.
All right, go ahead.
And Pastor Odom also visit JJC every Monday too, so he does that consistently.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. He took up for us. We were there to COVID, and twice a month in our schedule. But I do want to connect with you with the 100. We do have Torch Men's Conference in September, and it's men and boys. And we're in the process of putting together a prevention for men and boys domestic violence. And so I think that there's some room there to make that happen. And I just want you all to know that Torch is not a church. So you all can help. This isn't Shalom. That's the name of our church. But if you walked in, you didn't see Shalom plastered anywhere. You saw Torch. And this is how we are marketing ourselves in the community. It is a religious organization. And so we are welcoming our brothers and sisters to get involved and help. We are better together. I thank you all. Let's give this panel a hand. And we're going to put this platform back together. We're going to ask all of our pastors and elders and ministers if they would come, and our musicians to get ready, our praise team to get ready. And you all, you could take a moment here, about 5 minutes, and